Drupal for a long my Drupal.org username is 15 years old. Probably started using Drupal a bit before. My first DrupalCon was actually Copenhagen, so I picked a fresher version of myself for the introduction. I've been working mostly as a technical architect, and currently I work mostly for the European Commission. I work in a platform team that develops a product that empowers most of the websites for the European Commission, including the main website for the Commission, and from Evora. So, in case you haven't found anything yet about my city, feel free to ask me. You can find me on Twitter and Drupal.org for sure. So this is the typical, usual Drupal lifecycle for any project. You basically develop locally, you start coding in your laptop, then you move your code to any sort of integration environment, testing, integration, staging, whatever you want to call it, and then your code lives a happy life finally in production, right? That's typically the use case. Most of these environments are remote, so testing or integration, they are remote. Production, of course, it's remote. Development, it's its own use case, and it's actually most of the times local. It works on your computer. Raise your hands if you have used this excuse whenever a colleague complained about something doesn't work in production. Well, it worked in my machine, so it doesn't work in production, but it used to work in my machine. So in this presentation, let's try to break these two paradigms that we used to work. It doesn't work in my machine, and development doesn't need to be local. Again, raise your hands. If you are a developer and if you develop Drupal or any other web application, what do you use to develop? Do you have your server running natively in your operating system? Anyone does that still? Okay. Do you use some sort of Docker solution, like either Docker images or DDEV or Lando? Okay, pretty much all the room. Do you use any sort of remote development environment? Or is anyone familiar with it? Okay, awesome. Two hands. Okay. So the talk is going to be mostly about the third option. But most of the solutions that you use in the other options are also possible to be run when your remote environment, when your development is in a remote environment. So in 2024, the setup that you need to run a Drupal site is way more complex than it used to be 10 or 15 years ago. You need the correct version of PHP, Apache, and MySQL. You need a clone of the repository for the website database. You need a website database, ideally sanitized, and all the assets to run your site. Then you need a bunch of other tooling, such as Composer and Rush. You probably need a few of the PHP extensions if you want to get really professional with your development, like Xdebug and Xproc. And at this time, already we are talking about a solution that typically involves Docker and some orchestration to have all this right. You also need a terminal to interact with tools, and most of the times you need an IDE. A show of hands, everyone uses an IDE here? PHP Storm? VS Code? Okay, 50-50. Okay. Vim? Okay. So problems with local development, with local environments, and we probably have suffered from this problem in the past. Even if you use Docker, there is variability among your environment. Docker only runs native on Linux. It doesn't run native when you use macOS, when you use Windows. So it's not the same. And even if it's the same environment, Docker can still have some variations in versions, in configuration. It's not always the same. In terms of stability, whenever you are running your development environment in the machine that you are using to work, have calls, have chats, there's concurrency between your applications and your web server that is running local as well. any sort of operating system update or any sort of component update that you do on your computer might impact as well your environment. In terms of security, when you use a local environment, your code is just traveling with you if you travel with your laptop. Your laptop is stolen, if your laptop is not encrypted, then you might be vulnerable to have your code stolen as well. In terms of access, by default, it's not easy to share your local environment. You cannot just share it with others. Of course, there are solutions for that, but typically it's harder to share and to show your work. Something that works on your computer is a bit harder to show to others. It's hard to collaborate amongst peers, and there's the cost when it's fixed. It's also typically harder to switch projects when your local environment is running local. So if we do have all these problems right now, and we, in the last years, development in IDEs and in remote environments evolved a lot, why not take your development out of your local host? IDEs can work with remote environments. Both PHP Storm and VS Code evolved a lot to support this. Dockerized solutions work better in Linux. And your remote environment, in any case, if you run it remote, is going to be more similar to your production environment. You start not having a solution that is completely different from what you are using in production or what you are using in stage. The trick here is, even if it's remote, it needs to feel like it's local. You need to feel comfortable. You need to use the tool as it will be in your computer, and you need to be happy about it. So the concept of cloud development environments appeared in the last years. They basically describe an ability to set up an environment that runs completely on the cloud, but it's used for development. So they are on demand, so you just need to click a button and you have your environment ready to start and start developing on it. You can basically use any device to interact with your remote environment. It's basically a browser, and all your IDE can be running on like a website basically. But you can also integrate it with your favorite IDEs. So if you are way faster working on PHP Storm, then you are not going to change for an IDE that you are not comfortable with, and then you are going to lose time learning, and you are going to be less productive. So IDEs that you use what you already have. When you use a cloud development environment, you also have a centralized platform for all your developers to use. So it's easier to onboard anyone completely new to the team. You don't need to install Docker on his computer, configure his computer, configure whatever variables. No, it's ready for there to use, and everyone uses the same. And it's also a bit easier to control central security. Your code didn't leave the remote environment. It's still all in the same place. It's not traveling around computers or laptops from developers. There are a few competitors in this space. I'm mostly going to talk in this talk about Gitpod, which is the one I use. But Acquia launched a product called Cloud IDE that does the same. GitHub has a product called GitHub Code Spaces that provides this type of functionality. AWS product called Cloud9. You have a few. I think Gitpod is one of the most used ones, especially in the Drupal community, is one that really took off in the last years. Just going to do a little demo of Gitpod. The idea with Gitpod is that you start with your repository, and you can, on a click on a button, launch the full development environment on your browser, and you can fully develop your site there. Okay. No live demo because I'm old enough for those doing that. So you start your development environment. You just launch your workspace. The workspace is basically your site running. In this case, I'm not going to open it in Storm. I'm going to open it in the browser. You see that you have on the left all your code base, and you do have your site post as well. You have access to the full code base. You can directly edit your code using the IDE. It's full-fledged IDE. As you can see, I went here to the definition of the function, as you'd have going in PHP Storm. Any services running on your environment, in this case, it's exposing port 8080, it gets exposed on the browser. So any Docker service that you have exposing in a port, it's it shows there. You can see that it has all the tooling that you need. In this case, was Brush, and in this case is Composer. So in this case, I'm actually running DDEV inside Gitbot, one of the options that you have. Any change that you do on the code, you can see that immediately reflected on the code base. You fix it, then your site runs again, and it works very easily with Xdebug. You just need to, in this case, as in DDEV, you do DDEV Xdebug enable, and you just put your IDE listening for the debugging information, refresh, and you can see that you have all your variables there on the left side. Okay? You do have access to a terminal as well. So in this case, you started from a Git repository. Here you have your Git repository. When you are happy with your changes, you commit them and by environment. There is no environment anymore. Nothing from here run locally. Okay, so Git.io, the idea is that you start with a workspace hosted in any Git repository. So it works with most of the Git services out there, like GitHub, GitLab, any other. Just need to provide access to it. It provides an ID in the browser, so you can edit directly on the browser, which is nice if you are in a rush or if you don't have your ID with you. I typically don't do that. I typically use PHP Storm, connect directly with it. If you are VS Code side, you can also use VS Code. It has a plugin for it as well. And you can launch unlimited workspaces, launch them, and when you stop using them, they get automatically destroyed after 30 minutes. Without any activity, they die. To configure your site to be ready for Gitpod, you basically configure just this short configuration file, which basically defines what are the steps. This is one of the cases that I have in one of my sites. What I do basically is anytime there is a push of the Git repository, there is a concept that runs called pre-build. As you can imagine, if you do a change on your repository and you need to do some actions on the pre-starter of your site, it might be slow to fetch your Docker or do a Docker Compose pull or do Composer install, prepare all your environment. That can be something that can take a while. So you have this concept of pre-build. You do a push on the repository. Behind the scenes, there is a pre-build run for you. The next time that you're going to use your workspace, everything is prepared for you, and it takes a minute to have your environment ready. So in this case, what I do, I log in to pull the images, I run Composer install, I fetch a sanitized version of the database that I have available, and the site is ready to be used for development. Okay. Just two notes with Gitpod that are interesting, or two resources that are interesting. First one is a repository from Shao, which is an integration between DDEV and Gitpod. So if you are familiar with DDEV and if it's what you like to use, this is the easiest way to start. There's just use the repository. There's all the configurations to use DDEV in Gitpod. The other one is it's a browser extension actually. It's called Drupal, and it works with Firefox and Chrome, and basically allows you to, anytime you go to an issue in Drupal.org, you have a quick link to launch a Gitpod workspace already in that branch of the repository. So if you want to test a patch or if you want to test an issue on Drupal.org, one of the fastest ways you have, just launch the space and it's ready. Okay. Both of these most common IDEs, they do have support for Gitpod, but it's also possible to not use Gitpod and use direct access to a development server without SSH access. So I'll just demo as well the integration with PHP Storm. With VS Code would be very similar. So again, you start your workspace, the environment kicks scene. In this case, I say I can configure already PHP Storm to be my default editor. I said I want to open it in PHP Storm. It's going to open PHP Storm. I do have my site running now on PHP Storm, even if everything is on Gitpod. Now it's normal PHP Storm land, so you can use the IDE to navigate across the controls. You do have access to the terminal, and you do have access to the GP command to get an SSH command to directly log into it. So you can just use your terminal and log in direct to the workspace. So in this case, I'm logging into the environment, and you can do other things like see what are the ports that are exposed, see what is running, and you can see that you actually have access to, you can actually install anything that you want. So it's quite powerful. Works for this use case, but it would go for any other use case that you have for development. Finally, something that I don't know if people are aware. But using PHP Storm or VS Code again, you can connect to remote environments that can be basically be simple Linux boxes with SSH access. This is one of the things that I also use professionally due to the need to run applications in or Docker applications in Linux. As you can see, I'm a proud Mac user. Performance that you get even in fast Mac is not comparable, again, with what you can get on a native Linux Docker application. But using PHP Storm, you can just connect to your server. In this case, I'm using a desktop, very powerful desktop with Linux. I can connect to it with SSH in PHP Storm. Just need to indicate the host, the username, and the key, and then you can open your remote environment. All of this is going to run on that target machine. It's not going to run on my local desktop, on my local laptop. There is, when you do this, basically there is an application that or a client that runs on the server to provide this communication with the IDE, the local key. Then you do have all your code on PHP Storm. You can see that when you are indexing, or originally you see that the load on the machine is quite high, but then afterwards it's pretty normal, and it's totally possible to develop using a remote machine. So you can have a machine that you just use for development, and you just use to host your project and develop there, and not deal with it on your local computer. Yeah, that's pretty much what I want to share today. Any questions? Okay. No questions? No questions? Thank you.